Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. Today we are diving into the most transformative offseason in college football history with Big Jeff, who is joining me to break it all down. We're talking about the seismic changes that could be coming in college football based on some things that have been said at the SEC spring meetings. And remember how I've been saying for years now that the Big Ten and the SEC are eventually going to break away from the NCAA? Well, Greg Sankey alluded to it, and it's getting closer and closer than you think. Plus, Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty have been doing a great job of covering it all, so we will reference some of their work, their articles, and then don't leave after that. The show is not over yet, as me and Jeff give our tiers for what to expect in 2025 for Big Ten and SEC teams combined. From elite contenders to teams that might crash and burn, this is insightful, honest, and entertaining analysis where we don't fall for SEC bias and we discuss every single Big Ten team. So hit that like button, subscribe if you're a college football fan, and drop a 5-star rating if you're listening on podcast. Comment your thoughts if your platform allows it, and catch us every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the episode. Welcome in, Jeff. We got a big episode here talking Big Ten, SEC, changes to college football, a lot of things coming at us. Before we get into it, I do want to ask for you to let people know where they can find your work at if they like what they hear from you today.
Yeah, Key is on X at bigjeffsfootball.com. So Big Jeffs FT ball. And then I have my own website, bigjeffsfootball.com. I haven't been writing as many articles in the off season here, but I'm going to get back to it. And especially during the season, I'll have a lot of good in-depth, detailed, very insightful data-based articles. I like to go a little bit deeper than just the surface level articles you see at a lot of sports sites. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Jeff is here to fill in for Zach. Zach's still on his suspension, as Philip likes to put it. So there we go. Very good. We're glad that you're here, Jeff, and we're glad that you can be with us, and you'll be with us again on Thursday. Now, on Thursday, it will not be a live episode with me and Jeff. It will be a premiere episode. That's because me and Jeff cannot be here on Thursday night. However, we are going to record that beforehand, and we'll be taking a look at the top 25 consensus. You've seen all these different top 25. What do the consensus say about some of the biggest top 25s out there? We're talking CBS, Bleacher Report, On3, all those different ones. Jeff compiled them, and I saw it, and we will talk about it on Thursday night. It'll be a premiere episode. You can see it there. All right, Jeff, you ready to get into this?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. Well, everyone, college football is at a tipping point, and the SEC spring meetings are in Florida, where the battle lines are being drawn. The Big Ten is in the thick of it, and the clash is reshaping the game that myself and all of you love as well. The SEC and the Big Ten are pushing for a 16-team playoff, demanding 4 guaranteed spots each, while the ACC and the Big 12 get stuck with just 2. The Big 12 and the ACC are arguing what is best for the game of college football, while Greg Sankey, he's saying he doesn't care about the game and he doesn't need lectures from what's best from them on what's best for the game. The Big 10, the SEC could impose a power move to leave the NCAA in the dust. If you've been watching this show for the past 2 years, We've been on this, right? This shouldn't surprise you. We've been talking about how the Big Ten and the SEC will eventually break away from the NCAA. That's not new. What is new is whether the Big 12 and the ACC will comply and go with them, or if they will stay with the group of 5. Starting next year, the schools will shell out $20 million and a half to pay players directly, splitting the rich from the rest, all while the SEC and the Big Ten are even eyeing private investors to expand their dominance in the NIL front even more. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey and Big Ten's Tony Petitti are driving this train, but they're catching heat. Some even in Congress are talking about them and what's going on. One thing Greg Sankey said that got everybody fired up is he said, quote, "I have people in my room asking, why are we still in the NCAA?" End quote. Again, if you listen to this show, it shouldn't surprise you, but for many it did. Then there's a new NIL system meant to cap player deals, but boosters might just lawyer up and blow it up all together. Don't forget to that's run by the power conferences, the House settlement, not the NCAA. In this segment, we want to get it all straight. We're cutting through the noise, showing you how this Big Ten SEC power play could remake college football, maybe even ditch the NCAA and change college football forever. If you cheer for a team that or just love Saturday showdowns, you'll walk away knowing exactly what's at stake, why your team, why your conference, and the game itself could look different very soon. The deals, the fights, and more all impacting the future of the game we love. Jeff, knowing all of that, hearing all of that, I'm very curious on your thoughts, everything that's going on. Is college football in a healthy place to you? Do you view Greg Sankey as the evil villain of college football? Do you feel like this is something good for the Big Ten? I'm curious your thoughts.
Man, you threw a lot at me right there in just that few sentences. Let me just say, I do think college football is still in a good spot, but this is a vital period here this summer and this next year or two to define what once we're past this 12-team playoff this year, what is the next playoffs going to look like? And then importantly, will the SEC and Big Ten break away from the NCAA, like you said? So that's a big deal. So, I'm an optimist. I'm a glass half full guy. I do think ultimately when things shake down here, things will look better. On the bad front for all of college football, though, I can tell you, JR, the SEC and the Big Ten are still going to come out of this as the power players. They have the power. They're not going to give up that power. I know there's a lot of talk about we need a commissioner of college football. And for the good of college football in all conferences, that actually would be best, but it's not going to happen. If you've got the power like the SEC and the Big Ten has, why would you give that up? Why would you do it? And the answer is you're not going to give it up. So, but I'm still optimistic. And I don't think the Big Ten and the SEC don't care about everyone else, but they're certainly going to do things in their best interests without trying to blow up and destroy the rest of the teams. And so how do you go about that is the challenge. And I think that's what everyone's struggling through, right? And so there's a lot of frustration out there. So I'm not sure if I'm answering all your questions immediately here, JR, but I'm not everything's falling apart thing. This thing's going to blow up. I mean, so far with all these changes, NIL, people being played, people bowing out of bowl games, people are still watching it more than ever. It's more popular than ever. So irreparable damage hasn't been done. We don't all like these changes for sure, but some of it's good, right? The athletes getting paid. Let's all agree. It's a good thing, right? Them being a free agent every year, that's a bad thing. Okay. We've gone too far on the pendulum there. So it's finding that right balance, I think, is what we need to do. And that's a process. And it's frustrating because that process is taking longer than people would like to see.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Do want to give a quick hello to Blue Wolverine there. Thanks for being here, Blue Wolverine. Appreciate it. Philip says the SEC and the Big Ten are going to create the new XFL or the USFL. So hopefully it's more successful than those two if they do it. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, Jeff, and I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are doing the job that they have been hired to do. I know everybody's looking at Greg Sankey and saying, oh, he's ruining college football and he's a terrible person for it and all those things. And I get that, and I'm not necessarily excited about what Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti are envisioning or talking about either. I definitely don't like Tony Petitti's little 16-team playoff where he had two playing games and it was Big Ten versus Big Ten and SEC versus SEC. It's just stupid to me. I mean, why would you not have Big Ten teams play SEC? There has to be more money in that. There has to be more eyeballs in that too. And speaking of eyeballs, I'm somebody that pays attention to TV ratings a lot in college football. And I can tell you the TV ratings are not suffering. We see changes every single offseason. And as long as people are watching, they're going to keep changing. Now, I'm not advocating for anybody to, just completely say, I'm not watching college football at all anymore. I'm not advocating for that. But I am saying is until the TV numbers start going away, I think the Big Ten and the SEC are going to keep swinging themselves around and saying we can just do whatever we want. And that's really what this comes down to with them leaving the NCAA. It's not about will the Big Ten and the SEC leave the NCAA anymore. That's happening. That's going to happen. I don't see any refutement for that. The question is now, are the ACC, the Big 12, and the group of five teams going to come with them, or are they going to stick around? And I've even seen some people say, "Well, is the Big Ten and the SEC going to stop playing March Madness?" That's not what they're saying here. What they're saying is that the NCAA has lost all control over college football. They do not do anything. The only thing they can do is send notice of allegations to Michigan and Michigan State. That's all they can do. They can't do hardly anything else because they've lost themselves in college football. Now, if the House agreement allows them to continue to monitor things like recruiting violations and stuff like that, okay, maybe they still have some power, but the House settlement is run by the power conferences. It's not run by the NCAA. And so at the end of the day, I'm as much anti SEC as the next guy. Don't get me wrong, but right now the Big Ten and the SEC are in this together because they're the two most powerful and the two most financially stable conferences. It kind of sucks, but it is what it is if you're a Big Ten fan. And at this point, you're kind of cheering Greg Sankey on for some of the things he's doing because it's better for the Big Ten.
Yeah, and to be clear, a lot of people are. I get the Big Ten and the SEC being so powerful. That's frustrating for all the rest of college football. But there's a reason for that. They have the biggest fan bases. Like physically, they are the biggest schools, especially the Big Ten. The Big Ten is actually bigger than, enrollment wise than the SEC programs. Although adding Texas was real important because they're in the top 5. And then they have more passionate fan bases. I mean, and I'm not saying the other conference fan bases aren't interested in sports and everything, but it just doesn't run as deep as the big. So they have the numbers, and then per capita, if you will, fever for the sports, the SEC and the Big Ten, that creates the eyeballs, that creates the power for the two conferences. So it's not like they did this, money grab from a small base of power or anything. It's just the nature of those two conferences. They're huge and they have passionate fans, and that adds up to TV eyeballs, and that equals power, right? So
exactly.
Yeah. And JR, they are frustrated with the NCAA. The NCAA is trying to do the bidding of all the different people that they're representing. So that's why the NCAA is and then the NCAA is representing different conferences that have different levels of power. So that's a lot different than, Roger Goodell's group, who every division in the NFL has pretty much equal power. You're not dealing with this, some entities being stronger than others. So I'm not a pro NCAA guy, but they can only do so much. And it's just, we need a different model. It just doesn't work right at this point. And that's what they're trying to figure out here. Right, JR. And so, and I'm definitely not anti-Sankey, because I could tell you this, and we might get into some here depending on where the discussion goes, but based on the numbers over the last 10, 11 years since the 4-team playoff started, this 4-4-2-2-1 model, for example, 4 teams from SEC, 4 Big Ten, 2 Big 12, and 2 from the ACC. That's actually in line with the performance of teams that have been top 16 like teams. In Sankey, you can trust, and Petiti, they know the numbers. And they know the numbers say the ACC is not nearly as strong as the ACC claims they are to the media and in their press conferences. The ACC is lucky to get 2 teams in a 16-team field based on their performance the last 11 years. They're not good in football. They have Clemson. After that, Miami's trying to be good. And then it falls off a cliff, frankly, and it doesn't help that Florida State is kind of like bounced up and down. So kind of going on there a lot, but there's reasons behind why the power exists where it does. So, and it is hard to project where it's gonna go from here for sure.
Totally. And I think, what you were talking about there with the ACC and kind of where they're at. Like, there's a reason why the ACC commissioner and the Big 12 commissioner right now are talking about what's best for the game, right? We're just in it
That's
for
right.
what's best for the game because they're holding on to the traditionalists of people where they say college football has 10 different conferences and we don't want to see the ACC and the Big 12 go away like we saw the Pac 12 go away. So these, like, there's a reason why the ACC and the Big 12 are fighting for the good of the game, quote unquote, and the SEC is saying we couldn't care less about the good of the game. Now, we haven't heard very much from Tony Petitti on this. He sent out his 16-team playoff, which, if you see that, he's obviously in favor of everything for the Big Ten too. But these are the dynamics of where we are at right now in college football. Now, the problem with everything that you kind of alluded to a little bit is that the SEC, the NCAA is trying to govern all college sports right now, but
Yeah.
football is bigger than all these other sports, right? Football is bigger than volleyball. It's bigger than baseball. I mean, and those sports are big on their own. Don't get me wrong, but it's just bigger than those other sports, and so that's why the NCAA can't really govern all of these other sports in addition to football, and that's why the House settlement is trying to take football and basically make it its own thing with the power conferences run. This could end up in the SEC, in the Big Ten coming together and forming their own conference. I've heard some people talk about it and say this will be the death of college football and college football won't survive if that happens. I say bull crap. If that happens, college football will survive. It won't be the same. There will be a load of people that don't like it. There will be Big 12 fans that say this is terrible. We don't like this. But guess what? When teams went to the FCS and other teams went to the FBS, it survived because the FBS had the majority of the money, the majority of the fans, just like the Big Ten and the SEC does. Again, I am not advocating for this to happen. I'm not saying I want this to happen. At this point in time, I have to wear like 3 different hats. I have to wear my like college football fan hat, which wants to see all of the conferences compete together. And then I have to wear my Ohio State fan hat, which is like, I want, I want things to be more competitive. I want to see all the best teams in the playoffs. And then I have to wear my Big Ten podcaster hat, which is, I have to see what's best for the Big Ten here and say, this is good. This is not good. And it's just being pulled in so many different directions right now because so many different people are fighting for different things. It'd be easier if we just had one governing body, but as we've alluded to on this show and said outright on this show multiple times, is that the NCAA has failed. The NCAA has failed college football. So you can look at Greg Sankey all you want and say, evil Mr. Bad, Greg Sankey. You can look at Tony Petitti all you want and say, evil Mr. Bad, Tony Petitti. I've gotten in arguments with people about how the Big Ten this and the SEC that. At the end of the day, you know what every single person can agree on? It's the NCAA's fault. The NCAA is the one that never prepared for any of these changes. COVID happened. They were completely unready for it, completely lost all control that they had, and it's just been going further and further away. Am I off base there, Jeff, or do you see it the same way?
Here's one thing I also want to throw out, me being a stats guy, just the sense that the sky is falling. The 4-team playoff was dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten. So let me just throw this out there. So the last 11 years, so it's including 10 years of the 4-team format and 1 year of the 12-team format, which greatly expanded access to the playoffs, which is a good thing, a really good thing for the sport. But in those 11 years, the Big Ten and the SEC got 36 of the 52 playoff spots, 36 of 52. That's 69% of the total, almost 70%. If the last 11 years were that 6-team field with the 4-4-2-2-1, 4 Big Ten, 4 SEC, 2 Big 12, and 2 ACC, 1 group of 5, 3 at large. If it were that model, then the Big Ten and the SEC would have gotten only 57% of the total 176 spots, right? So I just want to paint a picture of, we actually are moving down a path of, even in a 4-4-2-2-1 model, although it sounds like this big power grab and everything, it's way better for everyone else than the old 4-team model. So I'm not saying everything's equal, because as we laid out, it's never going to be. The Big Ten and the SEC are not going to give up the power. So just forget the whole, it's going to be a level playing field. If you get over that, how can we get something that's better for everyone else? the data shows the 4-4-2-2-1 format is clearly better than the old 4-team format by a lot. And by the way, in the 4-team format, the group of 5 would get 0 in the field, and with Cincinnati and these other teams joining the Big 4 leagues, the group of 5 would have no chance to get anything in the 4-team field ever. Now they're going to get 1. And that might sound like a lot, but if you look at top 16 rankings, they're rarely in the top 16. So often they're going to get a bid when they probably don't really deserve it. They're going to be more like a 20 to 25 ranked team, and they're going to be one of the 16. So, when we talk about the good of the game, I actually think the 4-4-2-2-1 model is pretty damn good for the game versus what it could be, like the 4-team field when it was the Big Ten and the SEC just absolutely dominating things. I want to say here's a number too, over the 11 years, that old system, the Big 12 had 3 appearances over that 11 years. Think about that. 3 appearances. If that was the
that was with the Texas and Oklahoma, right?
Yeah. Well, no, that's true. That's the existing teams. That's the existing teams. So,
go ahead. Sorry.
So Oklahoma was the one that would have been in there, JR, but not Texas. Texas only didn't get into the last couple of years. But that 3 appearances represents 6% of the total that the Big 12 would get in. Now, in that if it were the 16-team field, the Big 12 would have had 17% of the total appearances. Instead of 6%, they would have tripled the number of appearances as far as a percent of number of teams. So I know I'm throwing a lot of stats out there. Hopefully I'm not blowing people away. But my point is that this newer expanded model is actually increases access, which everyone wanted. It doesn't level the playing field, which will never happen, but it's better for all the non-SEC and Big Ten teams.
Yeah, it's true. And we went much, much deeper into all this stuff in a Big Jeff's Insight episode. I think it was the last
May 15th. May 15th, if you want to look it up, folks, podcast where we said what would the last 11 years would have looked like if we had a 16-team field with those 4-4-2-2-1 model. So it's a pretty compelling podcast we had back then.
Yeah, it was... Yeah, May 15th. It's got a picture of Ryan Day and a Wisconsin quarterback on it with a trophy in the middle. So it's not hard to find. Just go to the live section on the website and you'll find it there. So, I totally agree with you. Like, at the end of the day, this is good for the Big 12, but for the ACC, it really doesn't change anything because the ACC really hasn't had all that many teams deserving of being in the top 16. And in some cases, they don't even have 2 teams deserving to be in the top 16. So they make out a little bit like bandits here. So it is good for them in that sense, I suppose. But at the end of the day, in college football, if you're one of these people that says you want the best teams in the field, you're not going to get it from the ACC. There are going to be SEC and Big Ten teams left out for a Louisville or for a Miami who is, around 20th. Now, that happens as well with the Big Ten. I think Illinois last year would have been in, and they would have been 21st or 22nd in the rankings or something like that. So they would have been out of the top 16. But I would argue that Illinois has played better teams than most ACC teams have. So Philip with an interesting thought here. He says SEC and Big Ten join together, make 8 divisions, and relegate the bottom 2 teams to the Big 12, college football, Super Bowl. I don't think they'll do relegation. I love the idea of relegation, but I don't think they'll ever do it. But I totally agree with you that divisions could happen. And actually, Jeff and I talked about the second half of this episode, spending the time like putting the teams in different divisions in the Big Ten and saying it could work this way, and completely hypothetical. So that could work, but I think we're gonna have to be a little bit further along until we see that start to happen. But I think it will happen because USC and UCLA and them, they don't want to keep traveling to Purdue and Maryland, and not discounting those teams. I'm just saying they're far away. Those are the first teams that came to my mind.
I just want to jump in. I could potentially see a division thing, maybe. What will never happen for the Big Ten, especially. You're never going to relegate a team. The one good thing the Big Ten has done, despite all their power and everything, they share all the revenue equally. I mean, Ohio State could easily say, you know what, we're getting screwed here. They could pull what Florida State and Clemson have done. We're the one, we're number one. We're the ones with the most TV viewers. We have other schools like Michigan that are right up there, pretty close, Oregon and others. But Ohio State versus like a Northwestern, come on. And yet Northwestern gets equal share because within the conference, they are very much about being equal in the Big Ten, very much so. So you're never going to see them, oh, Northwestern, you're going to get relegated. That's just not going to happen in the Big Ten unless they really change a cultural shift, and I just don't see that happening. But divisions are. I like the idea of relegation. I just don't think it will happen given the culture of the Big Ten is the bottom line.
I totally agree. They're not going to start sending Big Ten. I mean, the only way that would happen is if we had a governing body over all of college football, like an NCAA, and unfortunately, that's not happening. I do want to bring up before we end this segment, Jeff. I do want to bring up some stuff that's happening at the SEC spring meetings right now that's been talked about that I think is very interesting. Is that right now, obviously, the SEC is talking about going to 9 conference games. That is under consideration. And with those 9 conference games, there is a consideration that they will structure those games each year so that the best teams in the SEC the next year play those best teams in the SEC 2 or 3 times. And then the worst teams in the SEC, you're looking at your Mississippi States, your Arkansas, Vanderbilts in some cases, obviously not as much last year, but in most cases, those teams would be playing each other. And so what the SEC is kind of vying for here is kind of like the Indiana situation, where they would want to give an Arkansas or a Vanderbilt an easier schedule so that way this team could prop themselves up in a way that would help their recruiting, help their credibility, because the SEC saw what happened with Indiana last season and how much of a story that was. I don't think this is directly related to Indiana, but I do think it's a consideration here, which is one, we need to have bigger games for our network, right? You want to see Georgia play Alabama. You want like that kind of stuff the network likes. And then two, the teams that are kind of forgotten in some cases could get easier paths to where they only have to play, 1 or 2 of the top 5 teams in the conference. And so it's a really interesting idea. I don't know if it'll happen. If it does happen, I hope the Big Ten follows suit and does it as well, because at the end of the day, we're only going to have better scheduling and better fairness and stuff like that if we start seeing conferences schedule the same way together, which is why I'm a fan of the SEC doing this 9-game conference schedule. And if they do, I think it could be really good for the sport, as long as the Big Ten does something similar to what the SEC is doing here. Do you have any thoughts on that, Jeff?
Yeah, no long thoughts other than I like that idea. I mean, the Indiana thing, it was random. I don't think the Big Ten is not intentionally doing that, because I think we'll see that each year. However, and even this year, Indiana's schedule is significantly tougher than last year. But I like that idea, and I'll just leave it at that. I think
it would definitely make things more interesting, and it would definitely give teams that are at the lower tier a little bit better of a chance to kind of assert themselves upward, right? So really, unless you have anything else to get to here, Jeff, I don't know if I have much more to say on this other than just at the end of the day, like this stuff is happening. Oh, go ahead.
So just on the topic of this 16-team model and what it could look like. So this is stealing a little thunder from the Thursday podcast that JR alluded we're going to do. We're going to look at the 6 different media publications. They're kind of like too early top 25s, but these are all post-spring top 25s. So we're going to look at that. And we're also going to compare it, by the way, to the Vegas odds, which is really interesting, I can tell you. So you definitely want to tune into that. But pulling from that, here's what, if you just took the consensus of those, averaged out those 6 media polls and who finished in the top 16, like in essence accumulated the most ranking points across those 6 on average, and just seeded them 1 through 16. Here's what the field would look like by conference. The SEC would have 7 teams in the top 16. So 7 teams in the field. The Big Ten would have 5. So this is the media, right? This has got nothing to do. So 12 of the top 16s are from the SEC and the Big Ten. This is not coming from the Big Ten. This is coming from national media, is covering all of it. They're supposed to be non-biased, right? And they're saying those two conferences teams look way better to me than everyone else, right? So this idea of Big Ten power play and those commissioners, no, everyone else thinks that as well. And by the way, Vegas thinks highly of Big Ten and SEC. I can assure you that you're going to see on Thursday. ACC with only two, Clemson and Miami, basically. Big 12, one team in the top 16 consensus. One team. The other one is Notre Dame, and then 0 for the group of 5. And again, I'm telling you, this 16-team format is awesome for the group of 5. So we want to talk about being more inclusive. I know it's just one team. It's still awesome for them. So I just want to throw that out there, JR, that again, it's not a bad deal. 4-4-2-2-1 for these other conferences. And we'll just leave it at that. I beat that horse pretty good.
Yeah, and I think like that's what the ACC and the Big 12 see right now, right? Like that's why they are perfectly fine with just kind of tagging along with whatever the Big Ten and the SEC want to do. I mean, the Big Ten,
but they're telling the
SEC,
media a little bit different. Oh, like, oh, this is not fair and everything. When the numbers are saying, no, it's actually quite fair.
Right. And that's
right?
what I'm saying. It's like behind the scenes, they realize like, okay, it sucks. We're not going to get 4 automatic bids. But if we're looking at this, at a real way and being honest with ourselves, like this is good. Now we want to publicly fight for 4, conference or 4 automatic bids and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you're not going to win that battle because right now the Big Ten and the SEC just hold all the power. And if they want to leave, they can, which, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's not a matter of if the Big Ten and the SEC will leave the NCAA at some point. It's just a matter of when and who's going to go with them. And when that happens, obviously the Big 12 and the ACC will want to tag along. The NCAA still might have some jurisdiction with recruiting violations and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, this House settlement is going to put basically all the power to the power conferences, and they're going to kind of run things how they see fit, which who knows, could be better for college football. We'll see.
Just the final thing I could say too is even giving 2 to some of these conferences, you're still going to end up with some pretty weak teams. 2023, that 16-team format for the Big 12, you would have had their first team would have been number 14 Arizona State or Arizona, who was 9-3, and then number 20 ranked would have got in as the second Big 12 team, but they were only number 20 in the poll. 9-4 Oklahoma State. So again, only having 2 Big 12 teams, one of those teams would have been 9-4 in a year. What are we doing here? 9-4? Are you kidding me? So again, it's a good deal for them. I have other examples I could give in that too, how there's some really mediocre teams when you're only, even with just 2, you would think that second team would be pretty damn good. And this is in the new format too, JR. Like all these new teams added, if you looked at their records, you're often going to get a 3 or 4 loss Big 12 team or ACC team into this field.
Exactly. And it's why Big Ten teams right now are fighting for less difficult out-of-conference games, is because they know they're going to face a gauntlet in their schedule or in their conference schedule. Again, I'm not for it. I don't want that to happen, but at the end of the day, it's where we're at in college football right now. And if we want to, see it not happen, like there needs to be changes. It sounds like they're trying to make those changes happen. So, all right, everybody, we will be right back. We're going to hit commercial break, and then Jeff and I will come back, talk about our Big Ten SEC tiers. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Have you ever wanted to watch all 22 film, that film the coaches watch? Well, now you can. Introducing the Coaches Film Room. Over at Minutes to Sports, former college coach Zack Smith breaks down film of the most relevant teams in college football with a bit of a Big Ten lead. It's not free, so you'll need to sign up for the Colonel tier, which is $25 a month, but I can attest to you that it is far more worth it than that. With about 4 to 8 games per week, this is worth so much more money, not to mention Zack's analysis, making you a smarter football fan. Go check it out. The links are in the description, minutestosports.com. You won't be sorry. back here on the Big Ten Huddle. Please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. Share the episode. If you're on podcast listening, give us a 5-star review. That helps a ton. I don't say it often enough. I know other podcasts and stuff like that say it all the time, but it really does help. The channel helps everything else. So if you've got just a few extra moments, like I said, go do a 5-star rating. It's free. Hit that like button, hit subscribe. It really does help out the channel so very much, and we appreciate you doing that. All right, Jeff, we have put together some Big Ten SEC tiers. Now, the goal here is for us to try and figure out how does the Big Ten and the SEC stack up against each other. So these are not power rankings, okay? I don't want to get that confused. I don't want anybody looking like, oh, JR, you've got this team there. These are not power rankings. These are just tiers for where we think Big Ten teams could be based off what we know about them right now. We've put it into 6 different tiers. Elite championship contenders. All right. Then there is good, but not necessarily championship contenders. They are a good team. They're probably a ranked team, probably are going to make the playoffs or close to making the playoffs. And then has potential to be good or better. That idea is ranked or possibly even in the playoffs, or they could, maybe be right on the outside of being ranked, somewhere like that. Average are your teams that probably not going to be ranked. They could do a few things here and there, but at the end of the day, they're probably not going to be great teams. Probably looking at 6-6, 7-5, somewhere in that range. And then could be really bad. That's that's the teams that could go 1-11, 2-10, stuff like that. Could be though. They might be better than that as well. Could be 4-8, 5-7. We'll see. And then the very last section as just bad. That's what I put. Bad. So, Jeff, you and I kind of went through here. I think it's best for us just to go tier by tier and kind of look at where are these teams at? What do we kind of have in each tier and go from there. And Philip, no, JR did not get paid off by Diego Pavia having Vanderbilt that high. I just think Vanderbilt is at the very least an average team. Who knows? Could be better. Also, I could be wrong. We'll see. Call me call me too hopeful for thinking that Vanderbilt could be that high. So, all right, Jeff, why don't you start your elite championship contenders? You don't need to go team by team, but what were kind of your thoughts of putting the teams up there that you put?
Yeah, and to be clear, these are not who we think could make the playoffs and even win a game. These are teams we think can win it all. And then to do that in the current format, you're going to have to win at least 3 big, likely marquee. In fact, now that they've agreed to the reseeding, it is going to be 3 really good quality opponents. It could be 4 though for the lower level teams. So that's a gauntlet, right? And so if we're going to put, and I think Jay and I are both in concert on this, if you're going to say they're elite contender, you have to have teams with depth. And so I don't mean to get some Big Ten fan bases upset, but I only have 3 in the Big Ten. It's Penn State, Ohio State, and Oregon, just because all 3 high-quality teams, but they have the depth. They also have the upfront defensive and offensive lines that can wear other teams down, and that's going to magnify when you're playing consecutive weeks against these really high-level teams. So only 3 elite for me for the Big Ten. I also have 3, JR, for same reasons, really, in the SEC. Those are Texas, Georgia, and Bama. Very similar characteristics to the ones I just named for the Big Ten. Really talented, deep, really good up front, and just the type of teams that could survive winning 3 or 4 major, tough games that are kind of back to back to back.
Yeah, I agree with you. I only had 5 up there. I had 3 Big Ten and 2 SEC. I don't know. I lost a lot of faith in Bama last year. So if you're listening on podcast the way we have it, Jeff has Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Texas in his elite championship contenders tier. I just have Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Texas. So same thing. I just have Alabama moved one spot down. It's not because I don't think they're talented. I don't think they're good or anything like that. I saw what the team was last year, and I can forgive one loss to an Oklahoma, right? I can forgive one loss to a Michigan or something like that. Like that can happen. But to end your season losing to Oklahoma the way you did, I mean, just 0 offense in that game. And then to go and just completely lay an egg against Michigan, who was missing some of their best players. By that time, they didn't have any of their first round picks. I mean, they didn't have Will Johnson for a good amount of the year, but then they didn't have Kenneth Grant, they didn't have Mason Graham, and they were still able to just completely bully Alabama. And in some cases, when Alabama had opportunities to do something, they squandered them. And so it was really interesting to me. I know there's a lot of thought about like Ryan Grubb coming back and him possibly, making a difference there. I suppose it could happen, but I don't know. I think I'm at the point now with Alabama where I need to see it in order to believe they are a true championship contender, which doubting Alabama has never worked out for me in the past, but that's when they act Nick Saban. So we'll see if doubting Alabama does the
Let
same
me
thing now.
interject, and I could see, you can make an argument as you have, Jared, that they don't belong there. There's two reasons why I do have him there. Kalen DeBoer, if you look at the history of him and all of his jobs, I mean, he's just done amazing. He didn't do an amazing job last year, so we all agree on that, which is what you're saying, JR. So there's doubts that are out there, but he is a really good coach, and that's the consensus of people that really know football too. The other thing is the talent level is still really high from the Saban years, and he hasn't recruited bad. It's just it's going to be almost impossible to recruit at Saban's level because he was often had the number one recruiting class. So that's why I give them the benefit of the doubt. And, just like a quarterback in their second year, sometimes head coaches in their second year, think of Jim Tressel. I think he went 7-5 for Ohio State the first year, and then they won the national title. Not saying I think Bama will win the national title, but they're the type of team I think that potentially could for those reasons.
Yeah, DeBoer, he's a good coach. Don't get me wrong. He's done a lot of good things. I wonder how much time he needs to
Yeah.
build up at Alabama. He spent so much time in the Midwest, the Pacific North, the Pacific North, East, and everything, or Northwest, everything like that. So I guess I just need to see something that I
Yep.
didn't
No, I
see
get it.
from him last year.
Yep.
So
You can
all
make
right.
an argument for sure.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Next here, very similar here. Again, we'll talk about one team. Philip pointed out for us, but in the good but not championship contenders tier, I have Alabama, Illinois, Indiana, LSU, Michigan, South Carolina, Tennessee. Jeff, you have Florida, Illinois, Indiana, LSU, Michigan, South Carolina, and Tennessee. I'll just go through this really quick. To me, these are very well coached teams or teams that have a whole lot of talent but are not very well coached. It's kind of a combination here. And, Illinois and Indiana, they were difficult for me to put in this tier because I want to believe in them to be in that elite championship contender tier. But I don't think that they have recruited at that elite level enough the past few years to do that. They've done good things in the transfer portal. They've brought in good players, and they've developed their players incredibly well. But I don't see them beating a Texas, Penn State, Oregon back to back to back in the college football playoffs. I can't see it happening. I hope I'm wrong. I hope one of these two teams do win a national championship because that would just be so amazing for the sport. That would be such a fun ride to be on. But at the end of the day, I don't think they have recruited the talent to that level. And I also don't think they have the depth to that level either. We've talked a lot about how like certain teams are losing first round picks and they're too deep and how that's helping other teams across college football. They might be losing first round picks, but they still have at the very least fifth and fourth round picks on and they're too deep. You look at Illinois and Indiana last season, they didn't necessarily have 10, 11, 12 draft picks going to the draft. Now they might this next year. We'll see. They both bought a lot back, but at least going into the season, I don't see either of them as a championship contender. And then but I do see them as a playoff ranked team contender, and I think that's very good for both of those programs. The other one I wanted to point out, which Philip pointed out, is that with Nico, he says I'm a leaving. Just a fun way to use his name. Less Tennessee that high is interesting. I Yeah, it is interesting, Philip. I don't know. I could definitely see an argument for them being moved down to the potential. Maybe I'm not taking into account the Nico leaving as much as I should. I think they've still recruited well on the lines of scrimmage to be able to be there, and I think that Josh Heupel has still proven that he's a pretty good head coach. He just needs to iron some things out. So maybe I'm trusting him a little bit too much. I'm not super solid on that, but I guess I still am going to go with it. What are
So,
your thoughts, Jeff?
Well, Darren, that one, steal from Thursday a little bit, Vegas thinks Tennessee's in this tier. They have them as the 12th best odds to win the national championship, Las Vegas. And I take when Vegas puts a number out there, I put heavy weight behind that, man. So and that's why I have them right up there. Now again, I don't, similar to the Indiana, Illinois, which JR was just discussing. I totally agree. And I went to Indiana. It's not saying they're not real, they're not good. That's
Of
not
course
what we're
not. Yeah,
saying.
of course
This
not.
is like, I don't think either of those teams could win if they had to play two tough, like in Oregon and Ohio State back to back. They're not winning both of those. They could win one. Yeah, they could. They got enough firepower but that depth and everything, they're just not going to do it twice. I just believe that. My third one is Michigan. I give them a little better shot at that. The problem is with the first year starting quarterback, most likely that would be the main issue with it. But as far as having the dudes, the recruits, potentially the raw talent and the potential backup depth, as in it would be young depth, but still very talented, I would put Michigan as the best chance to become a championship contender just based on talent level, for sure. And then I did have, I had 5 SEC teams in there. I know JR probably hates to see that, but a lot of good quality teams where you can make an argument and some good potential quarterbacks here. LSU, South Carolina, Florida, we all heard about their quarterbacks. Their potential is there, right? They could make that leap this year. I'm not saying all of them, but that's why I had all 5 of those teams in the good, because they have the potential for sure. And I know people like to bash LSU and Brian Kelly. You got to separate likability. Most people hate Brian Kelly, so therefore they would love to bash him. He's not an elite coach, but he is a really good coach. And if you look at his history, the numbers support that. It's just he's not elite. So depends on how you talk about him. In LSU, though, also, you want to talk about the potential depth and everything, they've got the dudes to potentially make that leap if they have the right chemistry and everything. But I definitely put them as a second tier, and I don't necessarily expect it, but it could happen.
Yeah, they were kind of the team I was alluding to there when I was talking about, they might not necessarily have the coaching. While I do think Brian Kelly is a better coach than some people give him credit for, I think he's probably a fringe top 10, if not, many people would probably consider him a top 10 coach. He is not that elite level that you're talking about
Right.
when you're thinking of a Ryan Day, Dan Lanning, Kirby Smart, even Kalen DeBoer is probably an elite level coach. Just like I said, didn't really see it last season, and we'll see if we can this year. Joe R says that's fair. Ohio State, Texas, and those teams can readily absorb a season-ending injury to a starting O lineman. Indiana and Illinois less so. I think that's just what makes like winning a national championship that much more special. Like this isn't a sport where you can just, get a few guys out of the transfer portal and bam, you're ready to go. Like there was so much talk last year about how fresh Ohio State looked and how fresh their running backs looked because they had so much depth that they utilized all season that when it came to the playoffs, like Dylan Sampson for Tennessee was one of the best, if not the best running backs in the nation last season throughout the regular season. Like he was phenomenal. But when it finally came time to play in the playoff game, the dude was cooked. Like he was injured, he was hurt, he was not himself at all because he went through a long, grueling season where he carried the ball over 300 times that year. Meanwhile, you have Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson who are not dealing with that stuff as much as them. And then same thing with Quinn Ewers at Texas, right? Cam Scadaboo eventually kind of started breaking down in that Arizona State Texas game. Like it's not always like, oh, we don't have as much talent or we're not as good of, coaching or anything like that. Sometimes it's just the reality of football and these long, grueling seasons and how much you have to have outside of your starters to get there, right, Jeff?
Great points. And if anything, the seasons are getting longer. So it's even going to mean depth is even going to be more important than even before. And it's why I do love the expanded playoffs, more team getting in. I went to Indiana. It was just awesome to see. I know we lost to Notre Dame, but just to be in there is a huge victory and huge for recruiting, right? You're going to see an advanced recruiting from Kurt Cignetti and everything. But the reality is, let's just level set. The same teams are going to be winning these national titles. If you're not recruiting in the top 5 pretty consistently, at least top 10, you're not winning national titles. I hate to break it to people. It's just not happening because you have to win too many when you're talking 3 or 4 games. But I don't want to paint that as bad because it's still a good thing. Indiana could get in and they could pull the one upset, right? That would be the game you'll talk about for the rest of your lives, right? Forever.
Yeah.
And
that's
that's
the
awesome.
thing. Like, it's not all about winning a national championship
Right.
or your season's
Totally.
a failure. Like, that's one of the worst things about modern day college football is that people look at it and they say, well, if we don't win a national championship, everything sucks, you know? Now, as an Ohio State fan, that's the expectation. That is what they should be expecting. Same with Georgia fans, same with Oregon fans. Like, that's what you should be expecting. You don't necessarily look at it as like the season was awful and worthless if they don't win it all, but you definitely feel like you could have done more with the talent that you are bringing in and the amount of money you're spending on your coaching staff and stuff like that. So, and yes, Pitt Snipe Huskers says it's nice that we can all unite in our disdain for Brian Kelly. That's what unites us all.
He's
right?
got that red face. I mean, it's hard to like
fake country accent and everything.
Oh my God.
That video. Jeff, we did forget any teams outside of the Big Ten and the SEC that you think are elite championship contenders real quick?
Yeah. So what's funny about this, we talked about those other conferences, ACC Clemson, I put them up there for sure, but only one Clemson. And then if you look at the Big 12, I would put 0 in this category. So
your best one's probably Arizona State, right?
Yeah, it would be Arizona State, and I mean the consensus on them. Just what are they? God, where are they even in the?
I think you said 17th in the odds.
Actually, so FanDuel has them tied for 21st best odds to win the national title, and that's the best Big 12 teams odds. The best, think about that. The best Big 12 teams is 21. And we're talking about, let's put 3 or 4 of them in. I mean, are we nuts? Anyway, so I wouldn't even, now they have the potential to maybe, they're not going to win 3 games. So no, only Clemson.
Notre Dame, though. Joe asked about Notre Dame.
Yeah, Notre Dame, absolutely. No doubt.
Yeah.
Notre Dame is up there. So,
I think they proved that last year. And they proved it with players from the 2 deep as well. Like, that was the thing that made me buy into Notre Dame as much as I did was they did this with 2 deep players. Like, they did with guys in the offensive line that normally teams would get those injuries on the offensive line. They'd be cooked. They'd be done. But Notre Dame had veterans, had guys ready on the offensive line who are now going to Nebraska and Indiana and helping solidify those offensive lines. So, Pat Coogan and what's the other one? Rocco Spindler. Just really, really good guys. So I totally agree there. Okay. Has potential to be good or better. Now, I had a big number of teams in this section. You had a few less here, Jeff. You had Auburn, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, USC, and Washington. Talk about yours for a little bit, and then I'll kind of talk about my jumbled mess.
So this one, so USC, so some people, sleeping on Illinois or whatever, you're going to see the media's not sleeping on Illinois. The media's in love with Illinois. Vegas, by the way, is not in love with Illinois. So you'll see that on Thursday. But USC, this is one where, the quarterback does it right. They're getting better up front. They got a lot of talent. Lincoln Riley can call a good game, and they just lost close games. So they have the potential to jump significantly, not win a natty or anything, but it wouldn't shock me if they made like a 16 team. I don't know if they'll get in the 12, but big upside there is what I'm saying. And then Nebraska, Raiola, 5-star quarterback. You see quarterbacks make their biggest jump from their first to the second year starting. They also have a fairly easy schedule, 5th easiest in the Big Ten, and 5 of the 9 Big Ten games at home. So I look at Nebraska definitely as good upside. I'm kind of putting upside teams in here, JR. And then Washington, not a hard schedule either for the Big Ten, 5 Big Ten home games, dynamic quarterback in DeMond Williams Jr., and then strong running game. It's going to come down to the line for them. Can the line offensive line especially, which was pretty weak last year. So those were my Big Ten teams. And then for Auburn, again, bunch of one-score losses. Statistically, Auburn should have been way better than they were. Vegas knows that. Vegas loves Auburn, by the way. Vegas has them 17th best odds to win the Natty. 17th for Auburn. That's Vegas, not a bunch of media people saying it. Oklahoma, problem is their schedule is going to hold them back. And then Texas A&M has potential there. I don't know what to make of A&M for sure, other than they got a good, solid coach there. So the future bodes well, but I don't know how great they're going to be this year. But those are my teams, JR.
Yeah, I think those were overall, safe pick teams to put in this area. I went a little bit more like teams that could do it, right? Like they have the potential with what they brought in and what kind of next steps they have as well. So I had Auburn and Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Nebraska, USC, and Washington as well. I think all of those teams have upside. What you're talking about with Auburn and kind of some of their close losses. Texas A&M, I think, has a really good coach in Mike Elko. Oklahoma with what they brought in, and now they're going to have a really tough schedule. So if we're talking about where they actually finish, they might be more down in the average section, but I think they're going to be a better than average team. And I think they're going to get that defense right. So we'll see. It's going to be a really good game between them and Michigan to begin the year. But I went ahead and I moved Florida down into this section. I don't love what I'm hearing about DJ Lagway right now. I think Billy Napier just said that he is only throwing 3 times a week right now, which it's not terrible, but like Mark Gronowski is back. Mark Gronowski is throwing. So that's what makes me feel better about Iowa and their situation. And I think Tim Lester's going to do something special at Iowa. I know I had them lower down in my power rankings, and I was trying to explain to people they were not projections. They're not predictions for where I think they will finish. It's more so with like starting the season, the things that people think will be good have not traditionally been good for Iowa, and the things that have been traditionally good for Iowa are not going to be as good this season. So you kind of have a little bit of a risk here with Iowa. Now I think they'll still be good because they have Kirk Ferentz, and Kirk Ferentz is a proven coach who does a good job. But at the same time, he also, is kind of going in a different direction here with, more quarterback play and wide receiver play and good offensive line and a less experienced defense. It's not really anything bad on him. It's just a different structure of the team. And so I want to see it do well first. And then Minnesota, really good run game with Darius Taylor. I think next year, sounds like they have some real creativity with Coy Parrish and some of those guys. Michigan State, I think if Aiden Childs pops off, it could go well for them. I'm not necessarily predicting that. I don't necessarily think that will happen, but I have to put them up there because I see the possibility of it happening. And then I'm the same way with Nebraska, USC, like you said. These are 2 teams that are in this section just about every single year, but at some point they're going to have to show it. We're going to have to see it, and we'll see if it's this year. Oh, and then Washington, Damon Williams. I mean, he's fantastic. Jed Fish started getting things right. He's got a good secondary. That defensive line looked really good in their spring game from everything I've heard. Now, hopefully that's not bad news for the offensive line. That's always the catch-22 in these situations, right? But we'll see. So, any problems with the teams that I had higher up there, Jeff?
With Michigan State in there, I was just thinking maybe Aiden Childs would he maybe be the biggest wild card player in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I think if
You know
we're
what I
leaving
mean?
that distinction out, yeah, I think it's
Because
correct.
and I say that because I put him in the could go wrong, meaning he doesn't make the leap. Those bad decision making that he was making early in the season, that's him, right? And then things go south. So yeah, I'm not
Well,
saying you're wrong
and
because
the other thing with Michigan State is like they do have a proven coaching staff. So that's what
they
that
do.
was the thing that was so perplexing about last year was that like Jonathan Smith is a good coach. He does a good job. He's done a good job with quarterbacks. Like Joe Rossi is a good keep everything in front of you type of defensive coordinator, as we saw on the defensive coordinator rankings that we did. And then like Sam from College Football Sam had Brian Lindgren, the Michigan State offensive coordinator, 4th in his rankings. So it's one of those things where like I agree with you. Like Michigan State could fall off. They could go 3-9 this season. It could be a
Yeah.
terrible season for them, and Jonathan Smith gets fired. or they could also go 8-4. Like
Yeah. Well,
it's such a perplexing season.
my other concern with Michigan State is traditionally, even when their offense, for whatever reason, didn't go well, they could rely on that defense. They always had a reliable defense. And last year, that defense was not very good. So that kind of scared me. So it's not just Childs, really. He could have a great year. And if that defense doesn't step up, maybe they only improve by 1 or 2 games, which still is pretty good, right? But
I was gonna say they were 5-7 last year, so I'd get them to
yeah,
a bowl. Yeah.
yeah, which is not a bad deal. So yeah, I mean, so nothing major. I mean, all these mid tiers is like they're harder to rank rate for sure. So I don't have any other major headaches with it.
Mm-hmm. Argros says for all the flack Franklin gets, I've given some. Kirk is the actual version of Franklin that people paint him as. Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it with Kirk Ferentz before. Don't get me wrong, I like Kirk Ferentz, but I do think that he benefited a little bit from the Big Ten West, which was a conference that, or a section of the conference that primarily the team with the best defense and the best game planning and that kind of stuff typically won the conference. Now, where there's some outlier years, Purdue won it the one year and stuff like that, but that is typically who wins the Big Ten West. And Kirk Ferentz, I mean, he dominated in that because that was the brand of football that he really felt comfortable in. It felt like now they're going a different route this year. Like I said, Mark Gronowski, the receivers sound like they're going to be better. The offensive line play was really good last year. If they can continue that, so it's just it's kind of a boomer bust season for Iowa this year. Either these things that you're hoping, not hoping, like that you have planned for to be better, or things fall off. And I mean, we talk about Michigan State could go 5-7. Iowa could go 5-7. Not picking it
Yeah,
to happen, but if things don't go well and they don't capitalize in those areas, it's a possibility. So,
yeah.
but it's also a
It's
possibility to go 8-4, 9-3.
it's a good lead into the next tier, which is average.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'd say from my previous podcast, you know, Kirk Ferentz, he's actually recruiting better in the last 3 or 4 years than he was in the prior 7 or 8 years. So he's actually improving that. They're very consistently in the 30s. They're generating NFL talent as good as they've had. They've just had some position group gaps, especially quarterback, and then the lack of wide receivers. So agree with you there. The only reason I have them as average, frankly, is their schedule. So their schedule, they're second toughest in the Big Ten. They play teams that last year had a Big Ten record of 47-34. So that's 13 games over 500. That's scary. Another thing scary, they don't play the 3 worst rated teams in the Big Ten from last year. They don't play Purdue, Northwestern, or Maryland. So there's no easy wins. There's no, and even some of those, you wouldn't say that's an easy win, right? And so to me, Iowa, it's their schedule that has me saying average. But to JR's point, they could still go 8-4 very easily. Minnesota, I have them, you know, I put their ceiling as limited only because the inexperienced quarterback. So I'm a PJ Fleck guy. I don't love the style and everything, but I love his results. And he does more with less. And I appreciate that in him. So he's a really good coach. It's just when you have an inexperienced quarterback, I'm going to put him as average. Rutgers, third toughest schedule also. So that's a thing that I know they have the experienced quarterback in Calic Manis, but he throws a lot of he actually has a low completion rate. He doesn't throw a lot of interceptions, but he's like 55%, 54% completion rate. I mean, that's just not productive enough. Those are wasted downs. So that needs to improve, but that tough schedule scares me. And then UCLA I put in here, but Nico raises the floor. So UCLA, of all the ones in here, might have the highest floor, but I'm not going to put them above average until I see it, but they have the potential. So Jared, those are my 4. And then SEC average, I only had 2 in there. I had Missouri, who was way overrated last year. It was so annoying. And then Arkansas, which I can't imagine being an Arkansas fan. That'd be frustrating. It's like for football, you're just always have
Yeah.
hope. You're always middle and whatever.
I almost moved Arkansas down. I think this might be Sam Pittman's last year there. So we'll see, but maybe I have too much faith in them, putting them at average. Real quick, Argros says Wisconsin was the team to beat. They decided Chris wasn't good enough, and now they're paying for it. They were the team to beat prior to COVID. Yes, you are correct. They were, and then they moved on from Chris in 2021. I think you're right. So yeah, it was Wisconsin and Iowa, the two. Iowa was more recent, so that's probably why I said them. But you're right, Argra. Wisconsin does deserve a shout out there for what they did in the Big Ten West as well. Yeah, so I have Arkansas, Rutgers, UCLA, Vanderbilt, Wisconsin. I moved Vanderbilt up there from your tier. I feel like last season we saw it with Diego Pavia, right? They were able to take down Alabama. They played some really good teams and what they did, and that coaching staff. I've heard a few interviews with them, and they sound really confident. I mean, more confident than Vanderbilt should be. I mean, Vanderbilt did pretty well with James Franklin, and they did it this time. So I don't know, like. Call me crazy, but I believe Vanderbilt could be an average team this season. We'll see. And then yeah, like you said, UCLA, Nico, everything. Tino Sinceri was a great hire by Deshaun Foster. We'll see what that looks like. And I don't know. I moved Wisconsin up because like I don't think Wisconsin is going to be better than 6-6 this season, but I think they might be more talented than that. It's just with how terrible that schedule is for them. I mean, it is just a complete gauntlet of a schedule. They're going to have to steal one or two big wins to even get to 6 wins. Actually, three big wins just to get there because of what's going on with their schedule. But I think this might be one of those teams that's like, yeah, they're 6-6, but their talent could have had them be 8-4
Yeah.
if things were easier on their schedule.
So I don't in Vanderbilt, I don't disagree. I think they have a good coach. That coach came from Vanderbilt, so he knows what he's in for, right? He knows that in you're seeing good results. And when you have that experienced quarterback, and that guy, he's a gamer. You can do a lot with a gamer quarterback. So I don't have any issue with that. Wisconsin, just because of schedule, I do totally agree. Wisconsin could be a lot better than they were last year and still go 5-7 or 6-6. But as long as they show much better results, ability to run the ball, no, not a bunch of stupid interceptions like last year, and some better defense, even if the record's not there, Luke Fickell is just fine. He is just fine. Now, the next year, though, when they do get an easier schedule, which I'm assuming they have, although I think they have Notre Dame added to the non-conference, he will need to see the wins start to happen in year two. But I'm convinced Wisconsin wants Luke Fickell to work. So he's going to have more leash than most teams would have. Because if they get rid of him, who are they going to get, right? That's going to be necessarily better pedigree than him. So,
and he does have the better recruiting, and everything you hear from insiders is better culture and stuff like that. So it really sounds like everybody is fighting for the fans to support Luke Fickell. So I totally agree with what you're saying there. Like the administration wants Luke Fickell to work out. It just really sucks when the past 2 seasons your starting quarterback goes down, and then your third season there you get one of the toughest schedules the Big Ten has ever seen.
yeah, that's tough.
So, all right, in the could go wrong section, I had Kentucky, Maryland, Northwestern, Purdue. So this is where my Big Ten bias stops showing. I guess it does show a little bit though because I have Purdue in this section. But I think that Purdue does have a chance here. I think doing the coordinator rankings, I discovered that I do like their coordinators maybe more than I originally thought, and I think that Barry Odom brought in a lot of new faces. Maybe the culture gets better there. I still have some concern about the line of scrimmage, but maybe the offensive line, they just get some bigger bodies and they're able to do some more stuff. I don't know. I'm not ready to say they're just outright bad yet. I think they probably will be bad, but you never know. I'm not saying they're going to pull an Indiana and go to the playoffs or anything like that, but they could go 4-8, 5-7.
Yeah, the reason I had them there, JR, I mean, the unknown of the new staff and everything, but they have the fourth toughest within Big Ten schedule. So it's just like last year. So that's not easy at all. And that doesn't even include they have to play Notre Dame when I say fourth toughest schedule. So that's just a tough thing. But but it's so hard to project a new coach like that. A lot of transfers coming in, and certainly they could surprise for sure. And then I had a bunch of teams and could go wrong for the Big Ten. Northwestern, 7th toughest Big Ten schedule. Just there were a lot of room for improvement. Maryland, young quarterback. When you have a young quarterback. Another thing, are the coordinators getting worse? I mean, your coordinators thing really made me think about Maryland a lot, and not in a good way. Michigan State, Aiden Childs. So I'm not saying it will go wrong, but it could go wrong. And then Wisconsin, because of the schedule, is why that's in there. But if they show that they're playing well in Wisconsin football, then that's would be viewed as success. So maybe that's not a could go wrong.
And we did label Pep Hamilton as a coordinator who could rise up this next season, right? He spent some time with the Texans, was offensive coordinator there. I believe he was offensive coordinator with the Colts for a little while as well. So, and Ted Monachino does have a lot of NFL experience, just not a whole lot of defensive coordinator experience. So that was kind of why we had those guys down a little bit further, just because of the experience and the lack of, there weren't big names coming from like the group of 5 or something like that. It wasn't like Michael Shear coming in from UNLV, and we didn't even have him all that high, but he was higher than those two because he had success at UNLV, right? So we'll see. Those were rankings that had him lower. Like I was telling Larry and a DM afterward, like it's not necessarily that I think they'll be bad. They don't really have much proof of concept right now for me to put them all that much higher. So we'll see what happens. Yeah. All right. Anything else you want to do on the could go wrong section?
No, I think that stands pretty well.
Yeah. Philip says, is Luke Fickell the Wisconsin Scott Frost? Not that bad. Not that bad, Philip. Luke Fickell, I think, has had some more bad luck. I think Scott Frost kind of made his bad luck a little bit in some cases. I guess they did lose a whole lot of one-score games, so maybe not, but...
Yeah, it's a little different animal, I think, but he tried an experiment. It didn't work, right? The spread offense, and it impacted his defense because his defense was on the field a lot longer. I always maintain that with Wisconsin, that when they say complementary football, that's what they mean. By running the football, you keep your defense off the field so that they can play with their hair on fire when they do get out there. And so in Wisconsin doesn't have the depth that other schools have, and then that's why their defense has gotten worse. And maybe the personnel is not quite what it was, but it's not like, they've always brought in the 3-star kid and had him be there for 5 years. And then you've got the 18 and 19-year-old 4 and 5 stars for Ohio State playing some 23-year-old man from, at Wisconsin. That's the model. It's a pretty powerful model too, right? And that model's been mitigated a little by the transfer portal and people getting 6th and 7th years. So that is one other thing that we haven't even talked about. And I don't mean to open up a can of worms, but last season was really the last year that all those players that got those extra years and everything, almost all of them have rolled through now. So we're kind of back to more standard stuff, which actually I think that's going to hurt some of the mid-level teams more, because those were the type of guys that would hang around longer, not the Ohio State kid that was going to get drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round. He's still left right after the 3rd or 4th year. So, I do think some of the more higher level teams are going to, have a little bit easier time because the mid-level teams won't have the depth as much from all those extra year players leaving, and losing their eligibility, so to speak.
Yep. Yeah. Like Philip says, COVID years are gone. I agree. All right. Any thoughts on a bad section, Mississippi State and Purdue, Jeff, before we move on?
Yeah, Mississippi State, they had the right coach, Leach, right? That's so sad for them. Mm-hmm. It was a great fit. He didn't give a flip, being for a team that didn't have the greatest history. And so that's really, really, really a shame.
It is. Hope Jeff Levy can do some good stuff there. We'll see. All right. You want to do our quick hitters, Jeff, or you just want to get out of here?
Yeah. What are quick hitters?
These are just little news things that I was going to.
Oh, that you're going to do. Yeah. Let's do them.
So the Texas Ohio State, really interesting situation. They
Uh,
wanted to play on Sunday. Report came out today from Front Office Sports that Fox was actually going to move the game to Sunday, which I told you it would on Twitter, even though a bunch of people told me I was crazy. But I told you it was a possibility the game would be flexed and go to a different day. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on that. But apparently Fox did want to do that. They agreed to it, but Texas said no. Soft move by Texas. What do you think, Jeff?
but I actually don't blame them. Why would the SEC and Big Ten give up the power they have? Why would Texas agree to anything that increase the electricity and the environment to make it harder for them to? And don't forget, it's not just the team getting fired up. It's like hearing your quarterback getting the signals, and you have to go to the silent count. I mean, you ask an Indiana fan, they'll say they weren't used to the Ohio State, how loud it was, and that silent count thing just killed their offense and allowed the defensive line for Ohio State. You get the same dynamic here. So it is a shame, though. I
Yeah.
mean, I would
No,
love
I agree with you. I was telling Ohio State fans like, yeah, I don't disagree with Texas here. Like you wouldn't want to move the game to a night game on
they're trying
Sunday.
to win a
Number
natty.
one,
This game,
you lose you lose a game in the week to, have extra preparation, or a day in the week to have extra preparation. I mean, their next game is probably some group of 5 team, so it's not the
yeah,
biggest thing in the world, but
there's a lot of factors.
still,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and that was really the thing they said no about. It wasn't that they said no about playing at 8 o'clock on Saturday, because they can't control that. It's about moving the game to Sunday, when the previous agreement was that the game was on Saturday. So that's really what it's about. Jeff, hey, the Bison is coming back to Indiana. You love that?
I was going to say, I was almost going to open that. Then I saw that was in your quick hitters. So, yeah, of course, Indiana Hoosiers, like, what the hell is a Hoosier? So we really don't have a mascot. So that's what the big deal is. And I guess in the 60s, they actually had a guy dressed looking like a bison walking around. Hopefully that one looked a little scary. Like it came right out of a horror movie there, JR, from the 60s. So hopefully they'll do a better job with that. So, but at one time the bison roamed throughout Indiana. It's kind of wild to think of that, right? You think bison,
Mm-hmm.
it's like west of the Mississippi. It's not so. And so that's kind of the history behind that. I think it's pretty cool. They had a group of students and a bunch of people that really have advocated this for multiple years. So there's some Indiana people pretty fired up about this.
Yeah, I think it's really cool. Anytime you can bring tradition back like that, I just think everybody wins. So really cool for them. They did show a little bit of a shot of the mascot on top of the stadium there at that end of the video, and I think that it looks like it changed quite a bit. It looks like he has a T-shirt on, maybe a little bit more cuddly. We'll see. It'll definitely be something kids enjoy, I think. So, and hopefully nobody gets heat stroke this time, because that was the big issue with it before, was like it was unsafe to wear the suit with how hot it was.
It probably was like a real buffalo head.
Yeah, probably. Hey, take this off the wall and go put it on this kid. Yeah. So, all right, Jeff. EA College Football 26. The cover came out, and the deluxe cover came out. The cover just with 2 athletes
What?
features
Where's
Jeremiah.
Donovan Edwards?
Yeah, no Donovan Edwards this year. Jeremiah Smith and Ryan Williams are on the front for Ohio State and Alabama. But Michigan did get Bryce Underwood up there in the top left. And then if you see the guy in the Michigan jacket, I did not know who that was at first. Jeff, that is one Denard Robinson up there in the top left
Okay.
in the Michigan jacket. In addition to that, there's others on here. Reggie Bush, Ryan Day, and Caleb Downs are back there. James Franklin's back there. Dan Lanning. It's a little bit hard to see with how small I have it up there, but there's plenty of Big Ten representation. There's a fan with an Indiana flag in the back. There's just a UCLA flag in the back as well. Yeah, there's Nicholas Singleton is there next to Jeremiah Smith. So good
I mean,
amount
if
of
you
Big
look
Ten
at that
representation.
image, it's dominated by the SEC and Big Ten, not surprisingly, given everything we talked about, with a little bit of Notre Dame sprinkled in.
Yeah, you basically got Cade Klubnik and Sam Levitt and Dillingham, and that's about all you got for the ACC and the Big 12. So they
Yeah,
didn't put Carson Beck on there.
yeah,
You,
yeah.
you think they should have put Carson Beck and his
He
girlfriend
should
on
put
there?
his girlfriend on there. I
Yeah.
don't know.
All right. Let's see. Last one here. Some praise for Oregon. Oregon is one of the 6 schools who made the postseason in all major sports during the 2024-2025 season. That's football, men's basketball, women's basketball, softball, And what are the other two? I have the other two in the notes here. Sorry, that's yes, baseball, softball, volleyball, football, men's and women's basketball.
You know, it's that generates something thought and everything. And I know we're on the football and everything, but adding like the UCLA's and USC's and the Oregon, and they're good in so many of these non-revenue sports. It really is pretty cool. Like the Big Ten's ability to win titles across many, many more sports now has been expanded greatly. Even like their baseball teams has raised the Big Ten profile some, UCLA and USC. And it's kind of interesting. Oregon State is like not in the Big Ten, but they're a big baseball power and are hosting a regional. So, I've said this, data supports really, we got the 4 clearly best Pac-12 teams, and it really strengthened the conference. And that's the real reason why the Big Ten can legitimately potentially say we're better than the SEC. Without those 4 added teams, we wouldn't be able to say that.
I agree. And I think we do need some recognition for the hockey and the wrestling, even lacrosse too. Maryland played in the national championship for the lacrosse this season.
Lost to Cornell.
Unfortunately, they didn't win it, but yeah, they played in it. So props to Maryland there as well, and of course Penn State in their wrestling and Iowa in their wrestling. I mean, if you want to talk about teams that are always going to compete for a national championship, there you go. There's Penn State and Iowa wrestling, and Minnesota hockey, and Michigan, and I'm probably forgetting a hockey team. I apologize, but yeah, tons of good representation in those sports as well for the Big Ten. All right, Jeff. Anything else you want to get to before we get out of here?
No, just listen to our Thursday night again. Going to show you the result of all the polls. Going to compare that also to what Vegas thinks, and in some cases, I'm just telling you, Vegas has a lot different perception on teams than the media does. It's very interesting.
It is interesting. Yep. You sent me the notes for that this morning, and I was taking a look at some of that stuff. So very interesting. Should be a good episode. Like I said, it will be a premiere, so it will not be a live episode. We won't be able to interact with you all in the chat. However, we did want to make sure we still got you some kind of episode. So I will say, if I don't remember to say this in the next episode, I will not be on the show next week, Sunday and Tuesday, and then there will not be a Big Jeff's Insights next Thursday either. So next week, going to be a little bit more chill. Zach will have Purdue on, Russ from Boilermaker Express, to do a Purdue kind of season recap and season expectations for next year, stuff like that. And then there will be a UCLA one with Bruin Source as well on Tuesday night. So if you are somebody that you kind of like those in-depth looks at other Big Ten teams and not just the national big teams, you're going to love those 2 episodes that Zach has there. So thank you everybody for being here. Blue Wolverine, Philip, Pitt Snipe Husker, Argraw, all of you guys. We really appreciate y'all being here. Yeah. Joe, you're in there as well. I know I saw you. Eric, thank you for being here. Really appreciate all of you. Have a good one and see you next time.